Yeah, absolutely. So KP1077 or serdexmethylphenidate was tested in this trial mostly to assure that we have enough information to figure out how to phase 3 trial. So basically, how do we get sufficient data for the FDA to review the information for the treatment of patients with idiopathic hypersomnia with serdexmethylphenidate in a way that gets us to market as quickly as possible, so for patients to have access to the drug. So we ran a phase 2 trial mostly to inform us as to what would be the best way to run a phase 3 trial to get the data that we require, both from a safety and efficacy perspective. But most importantly, how do you design a trial? What are the endpoints that are relevant and what are endpoints that are meaningful for patients and physicians to make a treatment decision? And that's how that trial was designed. So we looked at, first of all, two dosing regimens. So one was once a day and one was twice a day. So a BID and a QD dosing regimen. And then we looked at a variety of endpoints to figure out, okay, so what endpoint would we, what endpoint is most meaningful from a magnitude? So does it actually change? And would the trial design actually be the trial design sufficient to inform us as to would that be a good trial design? We never intended the trial to provide us with any statistically significant endpoints or endpoints that showed a statistically significant improvement. The trial was just not designed or powered that way. As said, we were interested mostly in finding out, does the drug do what it is intended to do, which is provide patients with idiopathic hypersomnia with a significant improvement in their daytime sleepiness or excessive daytime sleepiness. To do that, you want to treat as many patients as possible, but you also want to see, okay, so how does that compare to a placebo group? Phase 2 trial, small numbers of patients. So we started out with 50 patients. You split it up into two groups, one group once a day, one group twice a day, so 25 patients per arm. And then we did a 2-to-1 randomization, which means for every 2 patients that were treated with KP1077, there would be 1 patient treated on placebo. So it's only about 8 patients on the placebo group. Single-digit number placebo groups give you a bit of information, but really does not allow you to make overall statements as in, did it work or did it not work? So once the trial was run, and the trial was run in the typical way of how trials are run in idiopathic hypersomnia or in narcolepsy, that is, you treat patients first all on an active compound to make sure that they respond and that it works. For a couple of weeks, and that for 5 weeks. And after 5 weeks, you then do what's known as a randomized discontinuation. So you then select patients that are treated with either the treatment that they're currently on, or you put them on placebo. And then you see if there's a difference after 2 weeks. That 5-week period is extremely important because that's where you really see the magnitude of change that is important. And what we saw on the all the endpoints that we chose, so excessive daytime sleepiness, idiopathic hypersomnia scoring scale, brain fog, or sleep inertia, which are really the 4 main things that we would be interested in. We saw a tremendous change versus baseline in all these patients that were treated on drug. In some cases, when you switch them to placebo, you see an improvement. Or what happens is the patients that are on placebo fall back towards their baseline levels. We didn't really test them long enough to go all the way back to the baseline levels, but you can see them trending back up to where they came from. And in some cases, you didn't see that on average. The reason for that is, as I said, this trial was not designed to show that difference. You have small number of patients on the placebo group, and in those cases 1 or 2 outliers really drive what is the mean of those patients. So in some cases we saw improvement, in some cases we didn't see improvement. We're not too concerned about that. It really taught us as to how would we design this trial. You know, is the 2 weeks of placebo treatment long enough, and so we will take that into account, so whether to make that longer or not, as well as that running phase, was that maybe too long, maybe we should shorten that. or extended. Those are really the answers that we were looking for, or the answers that questions that we had that we hoped we could find meaningful answers to. And the trial has provided us with all that information. So these outcomes have been discussed with some of the top treaters in the field of idiopathic hypersomnia and some of our trusted key opinion leaders, and they've provided us with the exact amount of information that we need to design an appropriate phase 3 trial. So as said, if you look at it from a perspective of patients treated with KP1077 versus them, at baseline when they started out in the trial, we see clinically meaningful improvements. So excessive daytime sleepiness in line with what you see with treatments that are currently on the market. So a magnitude of change that gets us into a scale. The scoring scale drops roughly between 8 and 10, which is where you want to end up. And you start with those patients that are have moderate to more severe disease. They usually start at 18 to 20. So we see a significant clinically meaningful change versus baseline for excessive daytime sleepiness when using the Epstein scoring scale. We saw similar improvements on brain fog and on the IHSS. We used the CVAS score for the sleep inertia, which is a visual analog score, which probably is not the most sensitive scale to use, but we did see improvement there as well. The clinical meaningfulness of that improvement still needs to be assessed, and we hope to take that forward into the phase 3 trial. But overall, on the 4 main domains that we looked at, so the sleep inertia, the idiopathic hypersomnia scoring scale, excessive daytime sleepiness, as well as brain fog, we saw clinically meaningful improvements when those patients were treated with KP1077. As said, the numbers of patients on placebo and maybe the amount of time that they were exposed to placebo was probably too small of a group of patients and too short of a time period to see significant or statistically significant differences in all. So in some of those parameters, we did see a statistically significant improvement compared to active, if you compare it to placebo, and also other ones we didn't. As said, we are not too concerned about that. That was not the intent of the trial. The intent of the trial was really to provide us with information as to how to design an appropriate phase 3 trial. Well, as with all stimulants, they just do have the typical things you see from stimulants, right? So you have insomnia, you have or could have hypertension, tachycardia, or increased heart rate. Serdexmethylphenidate is it's a prodrug, right? So the way the drug is absorbed in the body and the actual dimethylphenidate, so how that actually from a pharmacokinetic profile is transported throughout the whole body is very different than the most of the other stimulants, even the delayed release stimulants. So in that sense, this has a very clean safety profile. So we did in the trial not see any cardiovascular signs of any concern, and totally in line with all the information that we have. And obviously, serdexmethylphenidate has been tested extensively in a variety of studies. It's for example, the active ingredient, one of the 2 active ingredients in Astaris, which is used for ADHD. So an extensive safety profile, and that shows that it is a easily or a well-tolerated drug when used as prescribed. In the clinical trial, phase 2 clinical trials, we did not see any additional safety signals of concern or any safety signals that are outside the current known safety profile. We did obviously see some patients experience transient insomnia. So patients, obviously, once you start using it, one of the signs, obviously, what you're trying to do is to have patients wake up in the morning and have a day without excessive daytime sleepiness during the day. Obviously, when you start taking the drug or increase the dose, your body has to get used to it. So we did see transient insomnia, and most of the patients could deal with that. So they had some periods of insomnia during the first or the second night, and after that, that disappeared. There is no concern in regards to insomnia being a safety concern for the use of this product in idiopathic hypersomnia.